and this is
Becky.
And we are doing our Bickering book reviews. This time we're doing it on If You Could Be Mine by Sara Farizan. And it is about Sahar and Nasreen, and they've been in love since they were little. However, they live in Iran, so it's kind of illegal for them to be in love with each other. But it really hasn't been too much of an issue until Nasreen is engaged to somebody, and then Sahar begins trying her darndest to figure out how they're going to stay together even beyond that, because she wants to keep Nasreen in her life forever. So that's what's going on with this book.
Yep.
I really liked it. I thought it was very interesting that it was set in Iran. A lot of identity issues come into play because in Iran, you can actually legally get a sex change operation. In fact, they prefer that to being homosexual, which is not what I would have expected because the government pays for it. How did you feel about it?
So I liked it a little less than Sarah. I found the parts that take place in Iran fascinating. I did not know anything really about their culture, and they go into different ceremonies. You get to read about an engagement. It was an engagement ceremony?
Well, there was the engagement ceremony and then the marriage ceremony with the mirrors and the different things.
Which I thought that was fascinating. I thought it was very interesting about the fact that you're allowed to be transgender, but you're not allowed to be homosexual. And this was one of those books that when you're reading it, you're like, is this true? Isn't this true? And you're on Google, are they really one of the countries where it's most popular to get a sex change operation? Which I thought that was very interesting, and it's very timely because everything that's going on in the news now. However, I have an issue with a lot of these newer, not even a lot, I've just read it in a couple of these newer LBGT books. LBGTQ, am I missing one? Okay. Books, because when I read the description of this book about these two girls that were in love and then they are ripped apart because of cultural beliefs, I thought, oh, it's going to be a beautiful love story about two people who are in love and they care about each other, and isn't it wonderful? And that because of all these circumstances, they have to be apart, which to me would be a beautiful book. But I did not see a beautiful love story. I totally believe that the main character, whose name just slipped from my mind, Sahar, was completely in love with Nasreen, and I found Nasreen to be a little manipulative.
She was jerk pants. I don't know why. She was certainly not worth a sex change operation.
No.
It was interesting to see a character look at their identity issues and see if I become a man, will I still be who I am? There was all of that. It was an interesting concept, but it certainly wasn't worth it for Nasreen, and that's the whole reason why Sahar was even considering it.
This is one of those books where I'm reading it and I keep thinking, if a boy was doing these behaviors to a girl, if he was doing these things to a girl who's supposed to be his girlfriend, people would have a problem with this book. It would be considered an abusive relationship. Because there's a part where Nasreen even tells her, when she's going to go home and when she's going to study, and it just felt very oddly controlling. I did, going back to what you said, it is an interesting book in the point of view that a lot of people are confused now about what's the difference between being transgendered and what's the difference between being homosexual. And this is a good book that really shows you that those are two very different things. And it would be a good book in that way. I could see using this in a classroom to try to teach children, not necessarily children, it's definitely a high school book.
Yeah.
A little bit more about these issues.
Because it certainly brings up the idea that Nasreen loves women. If Sahar becomes a man, would she then still love Sahar? Is identity the same thing as gender?
But did Nasreen even really love women, or was Nasreen just on this weird connection with Sahar, and she kind of liked being the center of somebody's universe, and she kind of liked being able to control someone? Because going into the spoiler parts, once Nasreen does marry the man, she kind of liked to control him too.
Well, and I think that's the hard part about this book, is that Nasreen certainly isn't worth it, and Nasreen is pompous and needs everybody falling down at her feet, but I certainly think that it brings up some very interesting concepts that unfortunately are put off on a character who isn't worthy.
It's better in theory than in practice. Like, if it was a book about learning about different transgender and homosexuality and learning about another culture, and that was, like, the real focus of the book, and the love story not being the focus of the book, I think it would have been, at least for me, a much better book. But when you kind of, like, did this almost forced love story, and then, like, everybody knew about it, but nobody was talking about it, which I understand that a lot of people's families are like that, but it didn't feel authentic.
I don't think I can agree with that. I don't know. Like, I think that we see this kind of relationship in other books, and I think that Sahar fell in love with the ideal. I think that she was pretty sheltered in general. She didn't have many girlfriends. She didn't really get out. And so Nasreen was the only kind of close somebody or other that she could have romantic affections for, because she was probably the prettiest girl she knew, and probably the one that cared the most about her, and the one that knew her secrets, that had been with her, you know, through thick and thin. That, I don't know.
I guess I keep going back to the fact that the way it was marketed, the way it was presented to the reader, was it was a love story. But if it was Sahar in love with somebody named Neil who did all the exact same things to her, we would not be okay with this book.
Okay, I can see that. Because it really wasn't a love story. It was more of a story about identity, I think.
I agree. And I feel like identity took such a back burner in the story. It was kind of like, what are we saying here? Which is what I say a lot about these books. What is the point? And I don't agree with the way it was executed.
Yeah. I don't know. I really like the book. I like the insight into Iran, because I don't think I've ever even known that culturally that, you know, some Iranians are working around government rules and, you know, drinking alcohol and going to clubs and having the on the DL homosexual relationships, that kind of thing. I guess I never even really thought about it, and it certainly brings up that whole new perspective. So for me, it wasn't about the love story, but you're right in that it was marketed to be about a love story. But to me, I really didn't. It worked for me because so many other parts of it were more interesting.
I guess every time I got into the parts about the culture, which was fascinating, I totally want to go watch a documentary about Iranian culture now, because it was fascinating, every aspect that you learn about the culture. And it's very different than ours, but it's also kind of similar to ours, which makes it even more interesting. Mm-hmm. That was great, but every time we started with something like that, like such as with the engagement or the marriage ceremony, then all of a sudden it was, I love Nasreen, I want Nasreen, she's going to marry a man, but I can't have her. And then I'm back to, why do I care about Nasreen? So maybe it would have been better if it would have been basically a caste system issue, and it was a boy and a girl who were in love but couldn't be together because of that. And you lost... Basically, to me, it's almost two books. You could have had a book about identity and the transgendered issue versus homosexuality. And then you could have had a book about culture and the love story. But mushing them together, just, to me, it lost why it was powerful and impactful and why I wanted to read it.
Okay, no, that I can agree with. That I can agree with. That I can agree with.
We never agree.
I know. Well, and then the thing is, though, this book isn't very long. I mean, it's like 200 and some pages. Like, I don't know if you could get 2 books out of that. Like, the author would certainly have to write a whole lot more.
There would have to be separate books. And this is just a format note. I did listen to this one.
I listened to it as well, and I'm so glad I did, because I loved the narrator.
Yes.
I thought it was very helpful, because then I knew how to say the characters' names.
There was a lot of things that I wouldn't have been able to pronounce. That's really helpful with these kinds of books.
Yeah, definitely. Because also then you've got like different foods and cultural aspects that come through, and then you know how to pronounce those as well, so that was helpful.
That's why we know how to pronounce their names.
It's true story.
That's how they pronounce it on Audible. So if it's not correct, complain.
Yeah, for Audible.
Complain to Amazon if it's not correct.
Yeah.
So that's as simple as it gets. Yeah.
So yeah.
Do you have anything else?
I think we are ready to rate, unless you have something else.
I don't. Like I said, I wasn't... Other than being fascinated by the culture and angered by the romance, I didn't have that strong of a reaction to it. I will say I'm all about the book covers, and I wasn't thrilled with the book cover. You can see it. It's very dark. I think it gets the point across, but it doesn't make me walk into the teen room and say, I have to read this now.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Cover-wise.
It was, yeah.
Okay, so let's get into our rating system. I'll go quickly over it again. So, we, being who we are, created our own rating system.
And if you know us, this totally makes perfect sense.
So I'm going to start at the bottom and work my way up. So the lowest of the low is a troll.
Because they are the lowest of the low.
I mean, it's true. And then above that is a goblin.
Because they're low but mischievous.
They're,
so
you
we
know,
like that.
not as terrible as trolls.
They're kind of cute sometimes.
And then above that, we have the fairies. We have fairies because they're little and they fly.
And they're sparkly, so they're kind of good, but not awesome because they can also trick you to eat the food and you stay in fairyland until your feet fall off from dancing.
Oh man, don't walk into a ring of mushrooms. Bad
Don't
times.
ever eat anything if you end up in fairy.
It's true. Oh yeah, definitely don't.
Basic stuff there.
Okay, so above them is the unicorns, life givers, and there are many of them, not as many as fairies, but more of them. And then at the very top, one per year, is the Yeti, because there is only one Yeti.
Best book of the year. Yeti.
Best book of the year. So we must reserve that for the best book of the year. We also have half steps, so you can have 2 of any animal.
Mystical creature?
Okay, yeah, that's better. You can have 2 of any mystical creature because sometimes you need a half a step. So you can have 2 trolls or 2 goblins or 2 fairies or 2 unicorns, but only one Yeti. So I gave this book, I gave it 2 fairies.
Really?
I gave it 2 fairies.
I gave it 2 goblins. I was disappointed. I felt like I needed more. I didn't really connect with the characters. I did not connect with the love story. Really, the best part was learning about Iran, and I could probably have done that with a really good documentary.
See, and that's the thing. I liked a lot of the characters. I loved learning about Iran. I love the idea of learning about like identity issues, but I really liked Sahar's cousin Ali. I thought he was hilarious. He was the funniest guy around. Even though he was a gangster and a total bad boy, I thought he was the funniance guy around.
You want to go work in his underground.
It's true. Like, true story. And I really liked Nasreen's fiance. He was totally a doormat, but like
I felt so bad for him.
He was
you
such
are going
a
to spend
good
your whole
guy.
life being stumbled on by this woman. And then you're going to get a couple kids out of her, and you guys are going to be miserable, but you're going to be an awesome dad because that's the type of person you are.
He's such a good guy.
But it was just...
So maybe the male characters were better developed than the female ones.
Maybe they didn't need to be as developed because they weren't the main point of the book.
Fair point. All right, so here we are. Nice seeing you. See you around next time.